Hello and welcome. This is Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. So in today's video, I'm going to cover some demo applications for Chapter 6 that are similar to the homework assignments for this week. So, and actually for Chapter 6, we're going to have, there's actually two parts. Part 1 will be this week, and then Part 2 we'll do next week. So please go ahead and create like a new folder in your repository under your Chapter 6 folder, your Chapter 6 Labs folder called Part 1. And then go ahead and, put everything in there just to kind of keep that separate. I think some of the things I looked at, whatever, a couple weeks ago or whatever, last week, I guess when I started grading those, we had, there was like two different ones and, they were kind of a little bit mixed up and stuff. So it just makes it easier both for me and for you to kind of keep those separated out when possible. So the first one here, the first lab is about generating a fortune, generate fortune. So it's just you're going to have an array of different phrases, okay? And you're going to use a random generator to for an index so that you can grab those out of the array. Okay, but you'll just need one array for that. And it's got a method signature, a private void, generate fortune. And just to kind of review that, private basically means that this method is only accessible within the class itself. Void means it doesn't return anything. Okay, so basically, kind of tells you everything's going to kind of be done within the generate fortune, right? Obviously, you're going to have a button you're going to click, and when you click that button, it's going to grab the date. It's going to, well, actually, it really doesn't do much of anything in this case. It doesn't have any data, so it's just going to, this button call is just going to call generate fortune. Okay. All right, and then the kind of the one that's very similar, like really like too similar, it's generate compliments. So kind of the same concept, and you just have a button there, and then have a couple labels. Okay, so let me bring that up, and we'll go through that one. So I actually added this just now because I was just kind of looking at this. I just kind of wanted to explain this a little bit. So here's my array of compliments for this demo, the Lab 1 demo. And so, it's an array of different compliments. And, this is, you can define an array just like this, right? String array compliments. But something like this, if you're not going to be changing this, if you're going to be adding to it, then, you want it to be able, you kind of really want to do it like this, but let's just say you're never going to change this, right? Now, it being an array, you can't like use a const, right? You can't do this because an array is a kind of an object, right? An array is an object, and objects are handled differently than like primitives, like an int or a double, or your decimal. All of those, them are primitives, right? And those you can use the const keyword like that because it actually it knows what's going at compile time. Whereas when you've got an object, this is a string array, okay? When you have a string array, that really kind of doesn't happen until like runtime. So the C# under the hood doesn't know how to handle that, right? Because it can't assign all of this stuff. It's different if you just have an integer, like an int equals the number 5. It's straightforward, and it can save that, right? But when you're doing arrays, all right, it's going to actually save it kind of in a different place. And not that you have to really worry about this too much, but it's important as you continue through this program, maybe understand these concepts a little more. So like primitives, like your numbers, your int, your Boolean, stuff like that, they're actually stored in what's called the stack, okay? Whereas whereas objects are stored in a heap, okay? And it's just stored in memory different, and that has a lot to do with how you can do certain things with it. Don't worry about if that doesn't make sense, but just kind of remember, if nothing else, just remember that primitives like your int and your doubles and stuff are stored in the stack in memory, and objects are stored in the heap. And if that's all you can remember right now, that's fine. Okay. But here, the other way to handle this, though, so let's just say you're never going to change this, right? So one thing is obviously you can always make this private because you don't, unless you want somebody to access this outside of this class, right? And a lot of times you don't want to, and if you know you're not going to let anybody access this outside of this class, you can make it private. The other thing you can do here is if you're not going to change it, okay, is do read only. Okay. Now I'm not saying you have to do this, but this is probably more accurate. Like if you don't put this in here, it'll actually kind of give you suggestions and hints on that. Not that it's an error, but it kind of tells you make this field read only right there, right? So, okay. So what we're doing here is we're defining this array at the class level, and also we are using one of those random generators like we did before, and we're also defining that at the class level as well, okay? And then our generate click button that's on the form. Let's look at it just to make sure we see. Just get compliments. That's basically it. It's called generate the button, and it just calls the method. Right. That's all it does. It doesn't pass any arguments. It just calls the method. Right. And so then in here, this is where you're creating an index based on the random generator, right? And this is going to be starting at 0. And so that basically means with an array, if you recall, the first index is a 0, right? Okay. The next one here, complements.length, that's the upper limit, right? So the upper limit is how many? Is 1, 2, it's 8 of them, right? The upper limit's 8. So basically, really, this 0 and this would be 8 means anything between 0 and 7, because that length is just the upper limit, right? So you can't use an 8, you can use a 7 though. So basically anywhere between 0 and 7, okay? So it's going to grab a random one out of that list, okay? And it's going to save that as the index, right? This next always returns an index. So it's going to be either a 0 all the way up to a 7. Then it's going to go ahead and do another one. Well, there's a possibility that it could grab the same one, right? So what we can do on that is we can do a while loop, and we do while the index 2. So while they're equal, if it ends up being equal, let's go ahead and get a new one for the index 2, right? So on this line here, it's going to go ahead and get another one. It's going to come up here. It's going to check if it's equal. If it's not, then it's going to come out, right? It's going to drop out of that loop, and you're going to continue on. So that's how you kind of want to make sure that you have two different ones, okay? And then from there, basically, what we're doing here is we're just setting the text for complement 1 and complement 2 based on the index 1 or index 2. Pretty straightforward here, right? So fairly easy here. Let's just go ahead and run this. And get compliments. So the way it's set up here with that while loop, you should never see the same one twice. If you don't have that while loop, sooner or later, you click it enough times, you'll have it in there twice, right? So this prevents that. It's always going to be unique or never the same. Okay. Let me look at that again. Okay. All right, so that's that. One. The lab 2 here, This is very similar to what we've done before, right? There's a little reuse going on here. So this is kind of the accept and display, the GPA, the mission test, and it's either accept or reject. Um, but yeah, or display reject. That's never nice to say, huh? Reject it. So accept or reject on that. The only thing's different from, because you've done this already, right? In previous lab is you're actually using a method. Okay. So over here on mine, I have that a loan approval one that I've kind of done before as well in a demo. So mine's just for a loan approval with a credit score and an annual income. So let's go ahead and look at that one. My mouse is kind of jumping all over here today. I need to close this one. Okay. And maybe we can close the solution here as well. Let's see here. Yeah, everything looks good there. So basically, here we go. We got a credit score, and you have an annual income. Check eligibility and a clear button. So I have actually added a clear button, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But that's that. So in our code, let me go ahead and close this. So in here, we don't have anything to save at the class level, right? We do have a button, our button.click, right? And then based on that, what we're doing here is, so you know how sometimes we do these try parses and we do this right in the if statement, okay? Now, you can put this in if statement, but you'd have this one here, right? And this one here. This one would, and that one would go here. So you have that, this is kind of a little cleaner look, right? So basically, these are going to be Boolean, right? So whenever you do a try parse always returns a Boolean, right? The only way we get variables out of it by using these out, right? Using these outs to set these variables, right? So when it comes in here and checks the to see if this is valid, right? To see if it'll parse it. I shouldn't say valid. Checks if it'll parse it. If it can parse it, then it's going to return true, and it's going to go ahead and put the value in here. Same thing with income. And that way you can just do if valid score and valid income if both inputs are valid, right? And I really shouldn't say valid. Basically, they parsed. We'll learn as time goes on. We'll do a lot more validation checks, like checking is this a number and all that. You need to do a lot more of that going forward. But so basically, if that's good, then you go ahead and call your method. In my case, it's going to be is loan approved, and you're passing in two things. You're passing the credit score, which came from this out parameter, and then income comes from here. All right, so we're passing that in. So let's go look at that. And you can always do here and do this and click go to definition. Now, this being these small little things we're doing, you can get there pretty quick. But when we start building bigger stuff, it's worthwhile to maybe do that, right? And we'll go right to it. So basically here I'm doing a credit score and income. So I've got if credit score is greater than 700 and income is less than 4,000, return true. So this is doing a Boolean, right? So it's returning either a true or false. And so you have to make sure. So our different options here, right? And we made it private, so nobody can access this outside this class. Boolean means this is the return type. So if this is void, that means it doesn't return something, right? If you make this void, all of a sudden you're going to start seeing some errors here. Because you're going to have this return type, right? Voids don't return of values, okay? So this is returning a true or false. So here are your options. So you have to make sure it's going to actually return something or another, right? If you didn't include this one, let me just make sure. See, now even though this is valid. Why is this complaining? Well, it's complaining because there's a scenario, right? There's a scenario if that it could fall through both of these and not return anything, and the editor, the IDE here could figure it out. Hey, there's a possibility that you don't return anything here because both of these could come out false and it would fall through, and then so you have to make sure that there's always a way out, right? There's always a return. Okay. Pretty straightforward there. So another thing I just kind of did is I added and I'll just go ahead and show you. I added just kind of a clear form, a reset form. So you could reset it. So basically I have another button. When you click on that, I should have named that something besides button 2, obviously. Didn't really think about that. When you click on that, it's going to reset the form. And basically, there's different ways to do this. You can just do, this is the same as, right, what's up here, okay? And not that you have to do this. The lab doesn't tell you to do this. It's just something a little extra, just kind of some things I wanted to go over. So this here is basically the same as this. This is just a little cleaner, so to speak, than having to do this each time, right? So when you're in here, and that's another thing that I've kind of mentioned, I think, a little bit yesterday, is this is one reason you kind of really want to, especially like your text fields and your labels, when we're in here changing these things, if you just type in TXT, everything's going to come up it starts with TXT. So it makes it very easy to select your different things, right? So, so back to this though. So then otherwise you're going to have to do each of these, right, to set each of these, where it's just a lot easier to do that and then just do that and see, right? Well, you have to do that and then boom, there you are, right? So just a little quicker, I guess, right? So, all right. So we don't need this anymore. So yeah, clear is a little different for text boxes as it is with labels, okay? And then here it's actually taking, in case there was an error on the page, it's putting it back to black, right? And then here's another thing. This is a dot focus. So it's always kind of good to put focus back in the first box, okay? When you reset a form. And I'll tell you kind of the thinking about resetting a form when we look at the form itself here a little bit. So let me run this. So if I put something in here, 700 and some income, check out approved, right? Well, if I put letters in here, right? Check out invalid, please enter numeric values, right? And the lab doesn't always necessarily tell you to do all this stuff, right? And then also you got a clear button here. So clear is going to clear everything and it should put focus right back in this field, right? Now, one of the thoughts here, and so there's roles within organizations, especially big companies, where they have user, they call them kind of UIX. They're user interface specialist, right? And it's all about the user's experience, right? Because a lot of most apps are used by people that don't understand the programming and everything else, right? So when users use apps, sometimes, and especially like here, we just got a couple little different fields, right? It's no big deal about clearing something out, right? We do this and just, you can hit clear. So, there's some reasons that may be a good thing, but one reason it's possibly not a good thing is if you've got a really advanced form with a lot of different fields, excuse me, a user could accidentally hit clear and didn't mean to. So they filled out all this stuff on the form. They accidentally hit clear, and now they got to start all over, right? So there's other options that we can kind of do on that. So let's kind of look at that real quick here. I have to pull up something here. Okay, so another option here would be we could do something like this. And what this will do is this will handle single method handles the events of any text box you connect it to. Okay, so I'm going to have this. I have this, and then it's going to identify which text box triggers the event. If it's valid text box, select all text in that box. This will do a select all instead of doing a reset. Let me show you what this kind of looks like. Okay. So let me go back to here. I need to bring up my Solutions Explorer. Actually, I need my properties window. All right. And then so like this text box, what I can do for this is I can go over to the events here. And I can do for the on click, I can choose the drop down here and choose text box enter. Okay. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to do the same one for this one as well. And I'm going to choose text box enter. All right. And so let's take a look how that looks. And like I said, for this kind of a small little thing, it's not a big deal to have a clear, right? I'm leaving that clear there for now, but so here you check eligibility, or well, let's just say you want it to come in here instead of clicking clear, you want to enter more data, right? Come in here. Sometimes it's better to just kind of come in here, and when you click in there, it'll select everything. So then, as opposed to before, if you didn't select, it would always go to the end of the thing, and then you'd have to, kind of delete everything. Here, it'll select everything, and you just put another value in, right? So just kind of a different way to handle stuff like that. So it's kind of selecting everything, so then you can just start typing, right? So first time in, you got data. Next time in, it'll select it. Just kind of an idea, especially like you got a big form and, people are going to make changes to it. Sometimes you don't want to clear everything. So just kind of a idea. All right. Let's see if there's anything else we really want to look at in here. Pretty straightforward. Okay, so that's the end of that one. Lab 3. So this is kind of same thing you've done before, the vol thing, right? You're just making it into a method, right? You're using a method, so you're calling a method. So let me look at mine's a digit counter as opposed to the vol counter. Pull that up real quick here. Okay. Pretty straightforward here. Just grabbing the data from the field and counting the number of digits, right? So it is a string. You're counting the number of digits. And so here you've got a count digits, you're passing in the phrase, all right? Passing in the phrase, and then you're returning an int, right? Private method. So we're looping through each character in the phrase, right? Phrase.length, so each character in that phrase. All right. And then this is the whole phrase. This one here, this is each letter or each character, right? So if you entered in 1, 2, 3, first time it's going to be 1, right? As you're looping, 2, 3, etc., right? And then here's a switch statement. So this is just basically a traditional switch statement. And here, a lot of times we've seen, for other ones, we've seen where we kind of have a case and we have a break after. But in our case, we just are going to, we're just counting. So if it's any of these, right? And what this will do, if it's any of these, it's going to add 1 to the count, and it's going to break out of this. Okay. And then I still have that text box enter one thing on there. So pretty straightforward here. Like you've already kind of done this for the a different lab. Well, not this one. You did the vol one for a different lab. So the only thing's different is you're using a method instead. Okay. All right. The fourth one here. So here you're going to have a couple different things. You got calculated total area and calculate paint estimate. Okay, and it's showing you your method signatures here. You've got a private int, private double, so you know what your return. This is what you're returning, either int or double, right? And you're passing in 2 integers on this one and 1 on that one. Okay, so mine's a floor cost estimator. Way too similar. So, all right. Okay, let's take a look at that one here. Pull that one up. Okay. So once again, this is kind of a situation where, okay, nothing at the class level here. We got our button our calculate button. So we're on click handler event here. So I did want to mention kind of traditionally, it's always good to look at traditional things and, ways code used to be, or because you can still use traditional type coding, but usually a lot of languages evolve and there's other methods and other things you can do, right? So it's not always wrong to do it traditionally, and a lot of times if you go to work at a company, you're going to end up seeing a lot of traditional code in there, right? So it's always good to see and understand both. So in this case, it's kind of setting up a variable called length and width, right? So these are, but you can leave it just like this. You don't have to have it in here, but it's a lot simpler nowadays, right? To just do this, right? Just like we did before. I'm just pointing out, right, that you can do that, okay? And though we just get rid of this, and that's how we kind of done the other ones, right? So traditionally, a lot of times you always, defined all your variables and then, you go from there. But this is nice where this is, especially like I said, when you have multiple things you need to check for and you have conditional if statements with conditions, you can put all this, you can take all of these and put these right inside of here. But, it gets kind of messy, right? This just makes it a little cleaner and easier to understand. So we got 2 different methods. We have a calculate method for total area, passing in the length and the width, right? Then we get our total area. Then we pass that in to calculate the for estimate, right? And that returns a total cost. So Probably here, this might be better to be a decimal, right? So let's go to this method here. Well, let's just wait to change that right now. So you can always right click on this, right? Go to definition. Obviously, you don't have to when it's small, but you're passing it in there. So maybe we just want to do a decimal instead here, right? Right. So let's, and sometimes you can go ahead and take these. So this is one way to so use that use this IDE to help you when needed, right? So basically, we change that to a decimal because decimal is better for that. And what this is called casting. We'll learn a lot more about this later. But this is basically taking total area and total price per square foot and converting that into a decimal, right? So now that we have this as a decimal, right, we're going to need to fix this up here, right? Right? Cannot implicitly convert a decimal to a double, right? We change this to a decimal here. And now it's happy. All right. Let's go and run this. So about a 10 by 10 room here. Calculate 100 square feet, estimates 800. So very similar to what you'll be doing here on your lab. So that's that one. The fifth one here is what? It's about masking. So we kind of did this before. This is about, I think I'm masking what a credit card. I'm masking a phone number here, right? So let's go ahead and look at that one here. All right. So yeah, so one thing I did want to mention here on this, well, I'll wait till we get there. All right, so basically just getting a raw input. You're doing a try parse in here, doing it right inside the if statement. If you just have one, you just drop one of them in there. If you have multiple, like we did, like the last one, if you have multiple, maybe define them and then just put the booleans in there. Either way, right? And even if you just prefer, even with one, that's fine as well. It's actually probably a little more readable. So basically, here what we're doing is, we get the input. We try to parse it. This one's actually parsing this to a long because a big long number could be a lot bigger than you're not going to do a long on yours, right? Oh yeah, I guess you could do a long as well because credit card numbers, I guess most credit card numbers are all numbers, right? So because a int can only hold so many digits, right? A long can hold a lot more digits. So here we're doing a mask. And so we're passing in this raw input, right? We're passing this raw input. And let's go look at our signature on that. So here's our first one, our second thing, and our third thing, right? So the first thing is what? Just our data from our field, and then the character we want to mask with, and then which ones we want to skip, right? Like the last 4 digits. So it's kind of preserve, right? So The first one's going to be the data we're sending, just basically from the screen. This is our replacement characters, and this is the digits we want to preserve, like say in the last four or something, right? Um, so, um, so basically, we're looping through these, and we're just checking if the character is a digit, right? If it is a digit, then we're going to add that to the digit count, right? Well, and here's Kate checking if it's a digit or a letter, right? If it's a digit or a letter, um, you know, actually for some phone numbers, you know, letters could be used as well, right? So it's checking if it's a number or letter, and it's just adding to the digit count. Pretty straightforward there. Calculate how many digits to mask, right? So it takes the digit count and it subtracts the number of digits to preserve, right? And so then if the digit to mask is less than zero, digit to mask is zero, okay? Build the mask string. So we have our mask equals empty string. Digit seen is zero. We're looping through these and we're going to be setting this based on this. And then if we check to see if a digit, if it's a digit or a letter, if it is, right? Digit seen, we keep adding. If we haven't reached the preserve point yet, mask it. So we're masking, what we're doing is we're masking each one, okay? Until we get to the point where it's a preserved one, okay? So if it is, then we mask it. Now something you can do here, it's kind of, you know, a lot of times when you see these little, you probably don't see this on the screen, but like suggestion type things, right? So basically here you can look at show potential fixes here as well. So this is using the more traditional string concatenation, right? Whereas this is the more traditional, this is the more modern approach, doing the plus equals, basically taking what's currently in mask, adding replacement character to it, and adding it back into mask, right? And yeah, actually it's already down here that way. So this will preserve the digits, right? This is adding the replacement characters. This one preserves the digits. And if it's a space or dash, right, preserve that as well. Another thing I wanted to mention up here is, you know, you can kind of, as far as this is concerned, so anytime, it's probably always a good idea is, so like, you know, how we kind of talked about how Window Forms has everything kind of wired together. So that's how, like, a lot of times you can always access all those different form elements, the text fields, the labels, different places. So you can actually access all of them here as well. So here, let me just real quick here. Let me just grab this. So like you can access that, but, and actually that little squiggly went away, right? The reason that went away is because it was telling you the IDE smart, right? And it's saying, hey, you're not accessing any of these form elements, right? And all those form elements, when you create a form, right? And when you like hit that go button, you're creating an instance of that form, right? And all these forms are instance of that form class. So when you create an instance of it, that's why you have access to all these different form controls, right? But if you're going to have some methods where you're not going to access, like this method, it's just using this to determine what to mask and what not mask, right? So this has nothing to do, it don't have anything in here to do with the form elements. So actually you can change this, right? And let's look at the potential fixes on this. So here it's saying make static, okay? And so now, and why this is a good idea, okay, is because when you're doing programming, you kind of really want to limit access to things if you don't need access. There's no reason to let this method access all of the form elements if they're not going to be using them, okay? So by doing the static here, this is saying that, like I said, all of those form elements are belong to an instance of that class. So they're called instance variables. Every form element, every one of these, because once I try to uncomment this, it's going to complain because I've got static there now. Okay? See? Is not, well, not nullable aware. An object reference is required. When you make something static, right, that means they cannot access any kind of object reference stuff, right? So that's why that's saying that. Okay. So let's kind of recap here. If you already know, if you know a method is not going to be accessing any object related stuff, right? Like the form elements, you can make it static. If you're just passing stuff in and you're making some changes and you're returning something, right? And that's what you're doing here, right? You can just have it static. If you do need to access all those little form controls, right? And they all belong to an instance of a form, an instance to the form. When you click that go button, you're creating an instance of that form, right? If you need access to them, then you can't have a static there, okay? If you don't understand that, that's okay. Don't worry about it. You'll learn more about that as time goes on. So, okay, so that was the phone masker one. Let me close that one. Next one here is, so yeah, you're doing based on pine desk, different desk, mahogany, oak, pine. Okay. And the one I've got that's kind of somewhat similar, probably not a lot, but is a custom pizza order where you're going to pass in either, you know, a size of pizza and you have a cost, and then you're going to determine the cost based on passing in, well, you're actually passing in three things. Passing in a size, and you're passing in a number of toppings, okay? And then it's going to determine the cost. The cost is based on the size, but you're also passing in the number of toppings, okay, as well, just for display purposes. So let's take a look at that. Okay. So no defined class type variables or anything or arrays. Don't need any of that. All right. So here we're doing a button click. You're going to click on the button. It's going to call a couple different methods. Get the size of the pizza and get the toppings. Right. Then it's going to calculate the total cost using, this method here. Calculate total cost, passing in the size and the toppings. Display the results, and we're just displaying the results and setting this to currency for total cost. Pretty straightforward here. Here we've got a get size where we got either an S, an M, or an L, right? Kind of a compound if-else statement. Now we could go ahead and make this a little different. Let me, I think I'll just grab it to make things simpler here. All right, so which one is this? Small, medium, large? So what we could do here on that. So we're returning a string, okay? We've got our input there. So instead of this else, make this a little more concise and easier. We can just do our little switch statement that we've done. We've kind of learned this already before. So if it's small, return small. If it's M, return medium. If it's L, return large. Otherwise, always this is the default value underscore unknown, right? So we can use that. And here we're actually always setting it to lower case. Get toppings. We're getting the number of our toppings. Um, Here we're calculating cost. So here for this one, let's do something a little different as well. So here we can, why don't we use like an arrow function, right? So let's do a arrow function or a lambda, right? Lambda function. Let's do, we can do it just like this. And you don't have to do it this way. I'm just kind of showing you. Let's do size switch here. Okay. And then we're going to kind of do another little switch statement just for this one as well. Okay. So this one, if the size is a small size, return 8, medium 10, large 12, right? Probably should make this what? A decimal? Have to put M's after these. Okay. And then we'll probably have to fix this here, right, as well. So here, like it's going to tell you what you need to do to change this. Can kind of help a little bit, right? I don't know why it's doing that. So here we do decimal. And it's still going to have to fix this other one, though. And then here, what one doubles the topping cost. This needs to be a decimal, too. So let's open that one. Go to definition. Let's change this to a decimal. All right. And then here, what do we have? Number of toppings times cost. Let's change this to a decimal. Let's put an M here. That's getting a little better there, right? Here, let's change this to a decimal. And then we got to go up here, change this to a decimal. And we're good. All right, so back where we were. So back we calculate the cost. Calculate the topping cost. Basically take the cost per topping, which 1.5, and then multiply that by the number of toppings. And then we just do a calculate cost. Pass in the size and the number of toppings, right? So we have our size cost, topping cost. Add them together, and that's our total. We change them all to decimal, and everything looks good. No issues found. Looks to be happy. Let's see. We've got our button click, our get size. So once again, this is basically telling you this could be static. And I'm surprised. Oh, we're accessing that right here. So another option here probably would be a good option, to be honest with you, is to pass this in. All right. Let's see where we're getting get size. Right? You can always click references, right? Go to references, find all references. That's probably not a good idea. I'm making things harder. All right, whatever. Um, so get size was called from where? Right here. So basically what we could actually be doing on here is we take this, and this is just ideas, okay? That's all these is, you know. So we got this input, we pass this in. This is a string, right? And then if we go to get size down here, and then we could just do a string input. Why would we want to do this? Well, it's because, once again, why you don't necessarily have to have, you know, this don't need access to everything. Why have this have access to all those the form elements when it doesn't need to? This could be a standalone method without that. And now it's going to tell you that this can be static now, right? And these are just warnings. It's fine. You're not going to get points taken off, okay? And now that could be static. So I'm just kind of showing you some things. No, because the whole point was why allow and the same thing with this. You pass in text this as well, and then you can make that the same. Okay, but I'm just kind of showing you why let something have access to something it doesn't need access to. All right, let's just run this to make sure everything works now. So we have a small and number of toppings of 5. That looks good. Medium, 8. And a large, 8. Okay. So it doesn't matter what toppings we're gonna. Oh, yeah, we did. All right. So that's that. So that one's, you know, somewhat similar to yours here. But go ahead and follow. You know, I'm doing some other things where I've got some parameters here. Follow what it says here. Okay. Maybe I'll actually put mine back. There's different ways that I could have done that. You know, like I was talking about making it where you don't have access to those. You could still do that. There's other options for that as well. But, you know, try to follow this. It tells you the method signatures. All right. So go ahead and do that. So these ones here are going to have probably access to the, here you're passing in would type this. These ones could be static here. Okay. Whereas these will have access to all the form elements. So, all right. For now, as long as it works, happy. You know, just follow what it says for the most part here. I wouldn't go too crazy on that. Okay, then here's a form for a bank, Wayland Bank. So something kind of a little bit newer. Obviously, this one was kind of newer too. Haven't done anything like that in past assignments. This one, you know, a little more complicated, I guess. So you got something where you can log in, you can log out, you can make deposits, withdrawals. Okay. So mine here is kind of a library card system where they can enter a card number and a PIN. All right. All right, so let's go ahead and look at that real quick here. So here's the screen. I ended up, you know, just for fun, I was making some different colors for the buttons, just so kind of so they didn't all look the same and stuff. Then I also entered the kind of the access keys, right? I entered the access keys. And in addition to that, another thing I kind of did here on this, the properties things disappeared here. All right. So, but basically if I select up here, so this is selecting the form, right? You come over here on the right-hand side. What I did on this was I added, let me find it here. An accept button and a cancel button. So I'm just, trying some different things, right? So for each form, you can have different things. You can have an accept button and a cancel button. So basically, an accept button, instead of me putting in data and having to click login, I can put in data, hit enter key, right? If I hit the escape key, it's going to call a logout method that I have. So these are, this is the accept button. It's going to call, well, it's going to actually execute this button, what it does. The accept button is going to execute the login button. The cancel button is going to execute the button logout. Okay. And this isn't part of the requirements either, just kind of some little stuff I was kind of just doing. So let me just go ahead and show you that. One, and I think the pin is going to be all ones here. And then if I just hit the enter key now, it'll go ahead and it should log in. Nope, invalid pin. Let me see what I did. I think I actually. Let me check my data. That'll help. Oh, LIB. Okay. Now if I do the 1111 and I just go ahead and hit the enter key, since I added that to that form here, okay, and I hit enter key, it should go ahead and log in here, right? And it did. Welcome Alice Smith. Books checked out too. If I go ahead and now hit the escape key, right? If I hit the escape key will call the logout. You have been logged out. Not that you necessarily want to do this. I'm just kind of showing you some other functionality that's available. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this system. We've got multiple arrays. We're creating these at the class level, right? So once again, like it kind of telling you, you can make this field read only. Might as well just make this private as well. Private, read only. Basically, you do that for all of these, right? As long as you're not going to be changing values, and you know you're not going to be changing values, then you can do that. I don't know what happened there. All right, so made them just all private read only since we're not updating it. None of those little warning messages. So basically, we got a few different buttons. We got a button login, right? Button login is going to read the card number and the PIN. Call this login function with the card number and PIN. And we have a button log out. Okay, it is kind of ironic in a way because even though Windows suggests that you name your buttons like this, it is complaining about it. So that's just kind of interesting. I don't want to say complaining, but kind of was like, a lot of this WinForm stuff, a little more traditional. A lot of this stuff kind of hasn't changed a lot. So, but there's a lot of companies that use WinForm, so they've kind of left some things alone, so to speak. But okay, so then you got a button logout button, and then you have a checkout button. And what else we got? We got the return button. Okay, and so for login, the method handles the user login. So you're passing in card number and PIN. Using a little string interpolation here, right? Instead of just concatenating strings. But basically, we come in here and we're looping through all the card numbers. Check if both card number and pin match. Okay, if they match, we're good. And that's all we're really doing here, right? We're just basically seeing if it's matches, and then we return welcome, and we go ahead and display the books they have checked out. Okay. If not found, right, invalid card number or pin, we're coloring it red, etc. Okay. And then we have our log out here. And I'm just doing this dot clear. Remember we talked about that. Just another way to handle that instead of doing your, well, this will clear. Clear works for your text boxes. Clear won't work for labels, I'm almost sure. So, but for text boxes, you just want to clear out a text box. You can clear out a text box. So doing that on a log out. So logging out, then clearing everything. Check out books. So basically you're going to pass in a number of books, right? And then if the current user, current user's index is a -1, please log in first, right? So this is basically checking, making sure, did you log in? It won't let you do, you're not going to be able to check out books if you haven't logged in first, right? So obviously, where's this defined? This is also defined at the class level. That's why you can access this. That's why you can access this outside of the method there, right? You didn't pass it in there, right? And I do want to mention a lot of these. So let's just say that, some of these card numbers and maybe like even some of those easier ones, like the generate, like that very first lab where we generate those different things, motivational things or whatever, right? When we did that generate, the very first one. So, even though that, you could think, well, why don't I just have that array defined within my button, within my click event, the click handler for the button? I could just have that array. Yes, you could do that. The problem with that is that every time you click that, it's going to have to rebuild that each time. It's going to have to rebuild that array one time. Whereas if you know that that's a kind of a array you're going to be using throughout your code, then making it kind of like at the class level there, once it creates that one time when you start up your application, it's going to create that array. Then every time you use it, it's not having to recreate it, right? Every time you hit like that generate button, it don't have to recreate it each time. So that's another benefit that I don't think I mentioned before about with arrays and that. But yeah, so here our user index. By default, it's set to -1. Once the user logs in successfully, it's going to set this, right, to whatever, 1, 0, it doesn't matter, as long as it's not -1, right? It set it to I, right? Yeah, well, yeah, basically which one it was, yeah. It doesn't matter either, because you're really just checking it for it to be -1. All right, where were we? So we log in, we do that. We already seen that. Log out. Check out books. So checking for the user ID is not equal, the index is not equal to -1. If it is, then you're going to print that out. Otherwise, we're doing this. Books checked out. So this is your array, right? So here's your index, right? Your current user index plus equals the number of books, right? So yeah, our current user index is keeping the track of your number of books, right? So that user, so it does matter. I'm sorry, I was a little confused there. So the current user index is the number of books. So by default, it's going to be -1. Once you log in, it's going to set it to, one of these, 2, 0, or 5, right? Depending on which one you logged in as, okay? In the real world, you'd be reading that from a database or whatever, right? So this is going to be whatever you have already checked out, and then you're adding the number of books that you're additionally checking out, right? And just printing that all out. Same thing with the return books. You just come in here. First thing you do is like, so if you kind of try to enter something like that before logging in, then, you know, this is testing that. So as long if it's equal to -1, then you haven't logged in. Otherwise, so then you're taking your number of books, right, which you're passing in, the number of books that you have all checked out, right? And then if that is greater than the books checked out of the user index, okay, you cannot return more books than you have, right? So it's checking to see if it's greater, right? So this is just data that the user is passing in. You never know what a user is going to pass in. This is your setting that you know how many they have checked out, right? This is your actual data. This is what the user's putting in, right? So if the user's putting that in, you can't return more books than you checked in, right? All right. Otherwise, you're taking your current index, which whatever your books checked out, and then you're subtracting the number of books and putting that back into here. All right. So let's go ahead and run that. So let me see what we have here. Just make sure I do this right. So let's do the last one this time. And that's what, 003. And the pen was what, all threes. And then if I just hit the enter key, it'll log it in. Number of books. So if I want to add 5 more, I'm going to check out. Checked out books 5. Books checked out 10. Checked out, well, additionally checked out books. Right? Probably should have a little better message there. Books, but total books out it was 5. Now it's 10. If I want to return 5, right? If I try to return more than I have, you cannot return more books than you have checked out. So I'm just going to change that to 3. Return it. Okay. Return 3 books. Books checked out is 2 now. Log out, like I said, you can hit the escape key, and that should work here. You've been logged out. So back to this, just for the heck of it here, we'll type in number of books. I'll go to 5, hit checkout. You got to log in first, right? Same thing with return, you got to log in first as well. Okay. So a few different things here. You know, obviously, might as well always make it read-only for your arrays if not needed. This was used for, you know, this is the current user index, right? That means you haven't logged in. Also, we're kind of using that as well for number of books checked out. Well, we're using this int, yeah, this books checked out, right? We did add the, like I said, you don't have to, but for this, if you click the form here, come over here down a ways, you have accept button and cancel button, right? Sometimes that makes sense. Does it always make sense? Not necessarily. So I guess that's about it here on that. All right. So I guess that's all of them. So I'm kind of having one of those days. Haven't been doing so great, but so let me know if you have any questions. I will go ahead and put those demos out there. I might make a few changes to them, and maybe a little bit of changes to the requirements too. But I'll have that out there here soon for you to use and look at. Please let me know if you have any questions or any problems with the labs. I'm here to help you, and have a great day. Thanks.